Welcome into the Illinicast. I'm Austin Berkland alongside Sunny. Sunny, how's your week gone?
It's pretty chaotic. I'm spending way too much time on all this realignment talk, reading every article I can read, watching every YouTube I can watch. I'm waiting for it to die down, but I don't think it's going to be dying down anytime soon.
I know X has just been incredible, formerly known as Twitter. You are off it for 2 seconds, and then you have another school that's complaining or another school that's plotting their next move. It just makes me so thankful, like I said last week, that Illinois is in the Big Ten.
Oh, super grateful, super grateful. Yeah, my phone keeps going off with a new Pete Thamel article, a new Matt Brown article, who, by the way, Austin, we're going to have later on in the show. He's going to give us a little look into what's going on with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 schools. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and this first part we are going to talk about like some of the things that we're looking forward to during training camp, which kicks off pretty soon for Illinois football, and I am so looking forward to that. Hearing about the reports, hearing what Brett Bielema has to say about various topics, but tis the season of talking about football. Yet the off the field madness is just still going on, and it might go on up until that first Thursday of week 0.
Yeah, I mean, things could be different if Brett let journalists onto the field and watch training camp. But that's kind of been one of Brett's staples that he'll give you what, like 10, 15 minutes to watch, and then everything else is shut down to journalists. So I guess we're gonna have to distract ourselves with realignment talk for a little bit longer.
Yeah, a little bit. Hopefully, the Pac 12 makes some decisions within the next 36 hours, whether that's Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah leaving, whether that's them staying together, at least just one more run, trying their best. But there's a lot of balls in the air that right now that we just don't know who's going to catch them, whether that's the Big 10, whether that's the Big 12, or the Pac 12 themselves.
Yeah. Speaking of decisions that need to be made, Austin, the first thing I was thinking about when we were talking about things I'm looking forward to with the the training camp is how soon does Brett make it official that Luke Altmaier is the starting quarterback?
I think that's going to be done rather quickly. I think that's going to be done maybe after the first week of practice, make the illusion of competition, and then really give Luke Altmaier the confidence that he is going to have for that week 1 game.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's so integral to our season this year. As long as we get average production out of him, I think we can be a 7-win team. I'm afraid of if he isn't quite ready yet, or if he gets hurt. Not that Sikowski was a great backup, but I think he would have been an improvement to what we have as our backup this year. I know we have Paddock and the younger kid Leary. So, but I think we're definitely going to need Altmaier to kind of show himself in training camp and produce. And I agree with you. I think it's just a matter of time before Brett officially gives him the keys and announces it to the world.
Yeah, I think quarterback is important for this team, but whenever you have solid trenches in both the defensive line, the offensive line, you have a solid linebacker core, you have some young defensive backs, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I feel like quarterback is just going to be a game manager at Illinois because that's how Wisconsin won in the past outside of the Russell Wilson year. So if you just get any sort of production, like a Tommy DeVito level production, this team can make a bowl game, and this team could be even better than they were last year, which is crazy to say with all the talent that they lost, but they're still retaining a lot of talent as well. So I just want serviceable play from the quarterback position. Just make smart decisions on the field. Don't think about it too terribly much. Just get the ball down the field and then hand it off to that great running game that you have.
Which leads me to the next thing I'm looking forward to. Who runs away with the number one running back job? Is it Reggie? Is it just Josh McCray bounce back and look like the Josh McCray of his freshman year? Is it one of the younger freshmen that we got? Have you heard anything?
I have not, but I think it's going to be a running back by committee. I mean, I think all those guys offer so many different traits. You don't have that workhorse number one runner like you did last year, but I don't think that it's going to be a hindrance to this team because in the world of football anymore, it's running back by committee unless you have that stud, and I think that's going to be perfectly fine with Brett Bielema to have some fresh legs at all times throughout a drive.
Yeah, I mean, I say this from a spoiled front. Like, I know at the end of the season, one of the guys will have ran for 900 yards, 1,000 yards. For me, there's just a little excitement in the beginning to see if, I remember following Love's recruitment, when we were trying to get him out of, I think it was St. Louis. Um,
Yeah.
so, he looked like he could be the guy last year. And obviously, the Chase Brown was such a focal point on our offense last year that someone is going to have to step up a little bit. And I think this is just a part of being in an up and coming program and having trust in your coach that we get to see all the pieces that he's brought in and we can kind of see how it's going to work out as opposed to, under previous coaches just hoping it would work out.
I mean, you look at how Illinois football has operated in the past with uh, Pierre Thomas. He's not the workhorse back. You had EB Halsey as well with him. I mean, the list goes on. You haven't had too many situations outside of Richard Mendenhall and Chase Brown that have really taken that running back position by hold. I think it's a lot of been running back by committee, and I think that keeps going. And I think there's a chance that they can possibly get into a little routine. These running backs who were backups last year because Chase was that workhorse, so he could
Mm-hmm.
never, so they could never get into a solid rhythm of reading the right holes to go through because those touches weren't available week to week.
Yeah, you're exactly right. What are you looking forward to, Austin?
I am looking forward to seeing how these young defensive backs really develop and showcase what they can do on an actual game field because you lose Devin Witherspoon. You lose Sidney Brown, who is with my Philadelphia Eagles, by the way, and looking to be the first string
I
starter
saw
for the
that.
Philadelphia Eagles, which is just crazy. The development that he's gone through, seeing his recruiting process all the way to where he is now, it's just been an unreal scene. But I do think that the way that Aaron Henry is going to develop these safeties, you have Jim Leonard as your defensive analyst now. I think that these guys are going to develop pretty nicely and be really a good backbone for this Illini football team that nobody's really talking about.
Yeah, I mean, if our secondary, you know, I kind of said the same thing about the quarterback, but if our secondary just gives us B effort and B showing, like the front seven will take care of everything else.
Hmm.
They'll take their goal is going to be at the quarterback in 2.5 seconds. So the secondary just, you know, you just want to see him grow. You want to see, Aaron Henry and I forget the new defensive back coach, Phoenicius. You want to
Yep.
see them really teach the young guys. And, like you were talking about Sidney Brown, that's what we're going to develop you into. Just listen to us now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these conversations we're having, these guys might not be the most proven guys, but I have faith in the entire coaching system that Brett Bielema has. I'm just like, oh, they'll develop that guy. Oh, they'll develop that guy.
Right.
Oh, they'll
Right.
develop this position. I mean, the
Yeah.
list goes on of like every single position. I'm like, well, they're young, they're inexperienced here, but I'm like, well, Brett Bielema is one of the best coaches. They have a really great coaching staff around him. I think they'll develop him at least to in a serviceable state where I don't think there's going to be that many players where you watch on the field. They're like, oh, he's costing us the game right now. I don't see that happening too much this year watching Illinois football week to week.
It's crazy, just talking about Illinois football and not being worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, like we went from Tim Beckman, who was a just a mess every single week, every single year, to Levy Smith, who had some moments in the sun. But now you have a proven guy that offers consistency, that offers a true floor for what Illinois football can look like. It's a blessing to see.
Yeah, we're super super lucky. Um, what about center? I think that's another thing that we're going to be hoping that Josh Kreutz kind of. I think basically once Avery Jones turned his back on us last minute, I think we explored other center options, but I think Brett and the staff is going to give Josh every reason to win that job. I know supposedly he's undersized, but I'm hoping training camp proves that he'll be able to step up and show little glimpses of his father.
I mean, we've had some undersized guys that have done really well in the
Hmm.
past. Like, you think Nick Allegretti, he doesn't have
Yeah.
ideal size, and now he's a two-time Super Bowl champion. You see
Hmm.
Kendrick Green making snaps for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he started out as a little undersized compared to what an NFL offensive lineman is. If you just offer a little bit of solid gameplay during practice, I feel like that the coaching staff will have full belief in Josh to handle those center duties.
Yeah, you figure he's gonna if he has even 50% of his dad's moxie, that he can be that leader of the front line. And when you have the coaches and the coaching staff that we do um, teaching him, this is it's a big concern, but it's not that big concern because I think he's got the right genes. So it just needs to be coached up, and that's one thing I'm not worried about this Illinois football team anymore.
I mean, I'm not really watching in terms of like concern for this next thing I'm about to say. I'm just watching out of pure intrigue. I'm watching out of how good can these guys be, and that's the law firm. I
Yeah,
mean, the law firm has just been a sight to behold for Illinois football. I can't remember the last time. Maybe it's back when Simeon Rice was playing, and they are whether they went 1 and 2 in the draft or 2 and 3, whatever it was back in the day. There's not been this dominance in a long, long time by two Illinois defensive linemen where they are rivalry, that word, um, of Michigan, of Ohio State, of Penn State. I mean, it's amazing to see.
yeah. I mean, Newton could very well be the first defensive tackle taken in the draft next year. We're
Yeah.
super lucky. I love, again, this is now a Brett Bielema love podcast, but his strategy of using the NIL funds to kind of keep the talent in house, it worked because it keeps a guy
Hmm.
like Newton, it keeps a guy like Randolph on our line, and Newton may have been a day one or day two draft pick last year, but now you see the publications coming out where he's listed in the top 10 defensive linemen in the country. He's getting that pub about hyping the Illinois defensive line, going up, being comparable to that of Ohio State to Michigan. So at this point, I'm just hoping those guys don't get hurt because we got really lucky last year that, the injury bug didn't bite us too badly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be an underrated one to watch. The specialists. I just kind of want to see how all of the specialists go with our field goal kicking, and then of course our punting. Our punting wasn't the best last year, so I'm hoping to see some positivity on that front. So I think specialists could be a cause of concern, yet a cause for opportunity as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had the butt punt last year, which
Yeah,
which is funny because it's kind of the opposite of what was going on the year before, where we had Pat McAfee tweeting out our punters punts that would basically
for
right
the
be
brand.
for the brand, right. So we kind of went 180 on that position, but he rebounded the last couple games of the season. I know he's a little older. I think he's close to 30 now, I think. So
Yeah.
with another full off season, just to work out his kinks. We just need them to be good. Just
Hmm.
just don't lose us games anymore. Don't Our defense is great. Just don't have them start on their own 15 and have to give up points that way.
I think Illinois' consistency from last year to this year. Yes, you lost a few major parts, but when you have Iowa that still has not figured out an identity, when you have Wisconsin that is changing everything about their identity as a football program, this is a true opportunity for Illinois to take full advantage of this last year of the Big Ten West and be that team that represents the West in Indianapolis. I don't see a lot of reasons why that's not possible if you just get average play from your quarterback, when you get some quality kicks from your specialists, you have a great offensive line, your defensive line is legendary. uh, There's just not a lot of cause for concern when, and we haven't even talked about the wide receivers yet, which we will here in a second. I couldn't be more optimistic about this Illinois football program heading into this Big Ten West.
Yeah, I don't know if it's me drinking the blue and orange Kool-Aid or what, but yeah, in my season preview, my season predictions, I have us winning the West. I think
Hmm.
it's all going to come down to the quarterback position. Everything's contingent on him. If he can give us basically the baseline average, eighth, ninth best quarterback in the conference, I think we have the pieces in place everywhere else that I think Iowa's obviously very good because their defense is always good, but they always have that cloud of their offense, above them. Wisconsin, I know a lot of people are high on Wisconsin, and I think the Fickle hire was a great one, but it's going to take some time. I don't think that they're going to be able to implement all of Fickle's system all in the first year up in Madison. There's going to be some growing pains. So I think this is the year where this is our best chance to make that championship game coming out of the West.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the last year for it. After this, it could just be Michigan versus Ohio State, Ohio State versus Penn State, USC versus Penn State. I mean, it could be crazy after this year, seeing the repeat matchups that we might be seeing in the future. But looking at it this year, Illinois is in really good position to make some noise, and I couldn't be more excited. Uh, I said we were going to go back to the wide receivers. What's your confidence level in this receiver group this year?
I think when our staff took over, our wide receiver room was the worst of a bunch of very bad rooms.
Yeah.
There was just you had Isaiah Williams, you had four-star prospects who came in but never really panned out. Uh, like I'm talking about like transferred in like Hightower and whatnot. They didn't really end up elevating our room like we were excited for them being. Now, between Casey, between Williams, the Pat Bryant, I've been hearing a lot of positive things about Pat Bryant.
Yeah.
I think we have three solid guys, and more importantly, we have what does Elsie do? Is he able to perform as a freshman? He's one of the most hyped prospects we've had in a while. I'm rooting for him. So it's nice that we have so much talent at the position, and it's no longer one of the three or four things I'm always worried about.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's not even mentioning Hank Beatty out of
Hmm.
Rochester.
Right.
I mean, he was a solid pickup. He was Gatorade Player of the Year for the state of Illinois, and now he's a sophomore. And I can't wait to see how he develops this year. And then Casey Washington is this veteran that has had a quiet career at Illinois after he transferred and then came back
Came
and
back.
all of
Yeah.
that. And but on the field, he's been quietly steady as a good wide receiver for Illinois. So I'm excited to see what he does in this year with Luke Altmaier. So to see these connections with the receiving core is going to be awesome to see.
Yeah, I can't wait. We're I think just about 30 days away from kickoff, and it's genuinely I think the most important season for Illinois football in recent memory. Just I think if we take that next step, if we can win 8, 9, if we get lucky 10 games, like that excitement will come into next year because we are rebuilding next year. We're going to be losing a lot of players next year. The law firm is going to be gone next year. So and we play a killer schedule. I think we have USC, Michigan, and Ohio State or Penn State, one of those. So you're talking about like just a brutal schedule with a bunch of young guys playing. I think doing well this year will set forth enough positive momentum moving into next year and the years after that that we'll be able to deal with the bump in the road growing pain season and just take it as an exception as opposed to the norm as it was in previous administrations.
And next year, there's an obvious tier one with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC. There is a true opportunity to be that number one team in that tier two. And I know that probably won't lead to many Big Ten championships and everything, but what it will lead to is solid recruiting to where you can not ever lock down the state, but start getting that top five of the state of Illinois in recruiting. So I think that's going to be crucial. And I mean, absolutely crucial to have this good year so you can use that as a recruiting point to showcase the guys that Ryan Walters is recruiting to like, hey, that this was all Brett Bielema. This wasn't Ryan Walters because we have we have Aaron Henry right now, who is a stud defensive coordinator as well. Brett Bielema is the star maker, not Ryan Walters. So I think next year could be huge for that, and then of course showcasing to uh, that Chicago area kid that hey, we're still better than Wisconsin. Wisconsin is years away from implementing this air raid offense. So I think there's a crucial year ahead of for Illinois.
I mean, we may not be able to have expectations of going to the Big Ten championship game because of the reasons you described. But when the college football playoff moves to 12 teams, I mean, you're talking about three or four of them possibly coming out of the Big Ten. And I think if Brett can take our program to where I believe he can go, like I do genuinely think that that could be the goal of every preseason to try to land one of
Absolutely.
those spots. Yeah, we may get steamrolled eventually once we run into the Alabamas or Georgias, but just getting into the college football playoff is going to help with the other things you mentioned. It's going to help with recruiting. It's going to
Hmm.
help with, you know, the public persona that we have. It's going to help with Chicago. So, just because one goal is going to seem more elusive in going to the Big Ten championship doesn't mean that there's not something else that we can look forward to, and that is the college football playoff opening up once it gets to 12.
Absolutely. Hey, we have Matt Brown coming up.
No kidding.
That's exciting. Keep listening after this short little blip. Then we'll be back with Matt Brown. Welcome back into the Illini cast, and we're joined by Matt Brown of Extra Points. Matt, it's a pleasure to have you on the Illini cast.
Thanks for having me. It's been a hell of a week. Glad to take a couple of minutes here to chat.
Yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
surprised you have a couple of minutes. I mean, with the way these tweets have been, being all over Twitter right now, everyone's making phone calls trying to find out what's going on. Um, and you've been right in the front.
This is not how I was hoping to spend the beginning of August, but these are the times that we live in. This is the beat, right? Because these are the kind of stories that are really the bread and butter of my publication. So this is when I need to be hitting the phones to figure out what's going on.
All right,
I do
let's
want to
get into
mention,
it.
for Matt, if you follow our Twitter account at IlliniCast, I retweeted his article where basically he's made a couple phone calls. He is very familiar with kind of what's going on in the background in regards to the Big Ten and potential new additions from the Pac-12. And I reached out to him. I asked him if he'd love to come onto the podcast and elaborate a little bit. And here he is. So, but please click on that article because it was so well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, it feels like this could be the last stand of Pac-12 After Dark with some late night regents meetings. So let's get into where the Pac-12 is at this particular moment.
Yeah, so as of 7:39 p.m. God's time zone, as we're talking here, that's central, of course. Um, we should have some sort of resolution within the next 36 hours. What we have here on the Big 12 side is that the Big 12 has aggressively pursued Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah. They are interested in the Big 12 in roughly that order. There is dissatisfaction with the exposure and the amount of money in the final Pac 12 proposed television deal. Klyavkov and company are working furiously to try to spin up something a little bit better in the next 8 hours. But the Arizona Board of Regents is meeting tonight. They could potentially vote as early as tomorrow. And there's I would say, good chance. It's not 100%, but there's a good chance all three of those schools leave. Here in Rosemont, just outside of Chicago, Big Ten headquarters, there is a continuation of conversations that have been happening for the last year about Oregon and Washington. Yesterday, the beginning of those conversations was a small group of Big Ten presidents. I know Michigan's president was involved. Ohio State doesn't have a permanent president at the moment. I don't know who the other three were, but they were having a conversation about 4 potential candidates from the Pac-12: Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal. As of right now, not just what Pete Thamel and the Athletic are saying. I've heard this as well. The conversation's really centering around Oregon and Washington. And internally, Big Ten's trying to figure out, do we make a move here after there's an exodus out of the Pac-12? Do we try to go sooner? And then how do we make the money work? Because that's going to require bringing in another television partner, and it's going to require some pretty difficult conversations about who is going to play in those late night games. There is, Pac-12 After Dark is valuable because it's after dark. And Pac-12 Big Ten After Dark is more valuable because it's going to involve Big Ten teams, which have a larger audience. But that means that the game has to be played late at night, which sucks if you live in Chicago like I do. Sucks more if you live in Columbus or Maryland or New Jersey and have to wait for a 10 p.m. Eastern kickoff or a 9:30 tip-off for basketball. So there's a lot of horse trading that has to happen. It might not happen. I can also confirm that the Big Ten's been getting information about Oregon and Washington for a year, right? Like I had reported, McMurphy reported last summer, Navigate, big TV consulting company, several attorneys, representatives from both of those schools met with lawyers from the Big Ten in Chicago to talk about that. So we're going to see who pulls the trigger first. And if the Big Ten decides to expand, if the Pac-12 can survive on the knife's edge, but there should be some resolution before the end of the weekend.
Interesting. So you say now it's mainly focused on Oregon and Washington.
Yes, that's correct.
Because earlier, Cal and Stanford were also mentioned, but it didn't do much for me. So this update actually makes me a little more excited. I'm okay with Oregon and Washington. I understand the floor that they bring. At least they're trying on the field. With the other two California teams, I feel like I'm not sure their athletic departments want to make the commitment on the field to put out a good product. So I just wasn't sure what value that they brought. But
the principal appeal is twofold, because you're right. I'm 36. Cal has been butt in premier sports for almost my entire life, outside of a few Jeff Jedford years. Stanford has been up and down, but mostly down in football and basketball. The initial appeal was one, academic prestige, right? Big Ten presidents love to get all huffy about how the conference is full of warrior poets with 35s on their ACT, and there's some glow to be shared from rubbing shoulders with Cal and Stanford. But the other reason is to save money on travel. If you just add Oregon and Washington, you don't actually cut back on travel expenses for the conference as a whole. You make life easier for the LA schools in terms of travel. Flying 1,000 miles from Portland to Los Angeles is a pain in the butt, but it's still the Pacific time zone. It's much harder on athletes to go from Pacific to Central or Pacific to East. But if you add 2 more Western teams, that means more trips across country for everybody else. If you have 6, you can pot up. You can more regionally schedule. So the Illinois and the Northwesterns and the Iowas don't have to travel west as often. the math doesn't really work on that because there's no Cal or Stanford fans in the year of our Lord 2023, and ESPN and NBC don't want to pay the extra tonnage to bring those in, but that's why they were part of the original conversation.
That makes sense.
So, moving forward, what happens to the schools named Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State as of this moment?
As of this moment, they are in a real pickle. Right, Stanford and Cal, they can't get in. If they're not getting in the Big Ten, they're not getting in anywhere. And those two schools are in a unique position where they could potentially function as independents if they wanted to. Stanford's endowment, obviously an endowment's not a checking account, but if they wanted to tap into that a little bit, they could just buy the freaking Pac-12. Like they have money. They have an annual game with Notre Dame. They have some cachet. People want to play in the Bay Area. They could function. I'm working on reporting out if they could put their other sports in the WCC. Maybe you play basketball with Gonzaga. You're not making a lot of money, but it's not like you're winning anything anyway. Who cares? It would be unlikely to me that they would accept an invitation to the Mountain West because of the academic and snobbery, quite frankly, of those schools. Right? They don't want to be seen as having to play the poors at New Mexico and Wyoming, who are, got 22s on their ACT and voted for Republicans, are not doing the research that Stanford's doing, right? They'd rather go independent. Washington State and Oregon State, that's your option. And you could call that league the Mountain West. You could call it the Pac-12. You could call it the Pacific Northwest Conference, whatever you want to call it. You're not in the Power Five anymore. If the Pac-12, as we know it, disintegrates, which I think is bad for college sports. But I don't know if you guys have ever been to Pullman. Like if we were creating power conferences now, we wouldn't pick the team that's 2 football punts away from Idaho.
Yeah. Speaking of that team, last year, obviously, when the UCLA-USC merger was announced, there was a lot of talk that USC didn't want to bring the other teams with it, mainly the ones we're talking about right now, Oregon and Washington. So that's still the same.
True. That's true, but here's the thing: USC doesn't have a formal vote because their ass isn't in the conference yet. Yeah. And this is the same thing, right? And listen, they only get one vote anyway. UCLA only gets one vote, and you get overruled. And the reason that they didn't want it is they want to monopolize the recruiting and media exposure and power of the Los Angeles market. And if you're not sharing that with anybody else in the West, then for every recruit that lives in Southern California for any sport, you tell them if you want to play games in Southern California, so mom and dad and Mima and Pop can come watch you, you got to play in the Big Ten or you got to slum it in the Big West and you can go play Long Beach State. And if Oregon or anybody else comes in there and they're playing games in that market too, you lose the monopoly on that area. Now USC, if they're going to be able to recruit in Texas if they want to. If they decide they want to be involved in recruiting Chicago or Cleveland or Cincinnati, they probably could pick a kid or two there. But they see enormous value in monopolizing that. And given Oregon's brand and their money and their NIL activity, it will make their recruiting jobs much harder if they get brought in. But them's the breaks, baby. That's you knew that was a risk when you signed up for this and trying to expedite for super conferences. You knew that super conferences might get created.
Final one for you, Matt. We talked a lot about the West Coast, and Florida State has been making a big-time fuss as of late. Yep. They have a lot of complaints, but what is their solution? Because the grant of rights is still a pretty locked-down legal document right now. But what happens in the future? Is it as strong as I laid it out, or?
Before I answer that question, just for my benefit, what is the House rule on swearing on this podcast?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah, we don't care.
Okay. Florida State's solution is to bitch and moan until they can to make their own people raise more money, because if they had a legal out right now, they would do it. It costs $500 million to get out of that document right now. And you're even seeing a couple of these athletic directors in the ACC, like Bubba Cunningham in North Carolina, got on the radio and did this today. And his words were like, "I'm just a little bit confused with what Florida State's doing right now, and I don't think that's being a good partner." In his head, he's like, "Man, fuck you! Like if you're going to do it, do it, right? And sanction me with your army? Oh, you don't have an army? You better shut the fuck up, thing, right? Like that's what this is, and it's normally frustrating. It's enormously frustrating. The other weird thing about this is that Florida State, as of right this second, doesn't even have a home. The SEC is lukewarm at best about bringing them in. It doesn't have another television market. And one of the big issues in the Big Ten, and I'm telling you, as somebody whose entire job is to talk to professors and university presidents and athletic directors and consultants about this stuff for a living. This is not me being a political partisan. This is me telling you the honest to God truth. The Big Ten presidents don't want to fuck with Ron DeSantis right now, and they don't want a Florida public institution where the higher ed governance is becoming extraordinarily politicized. And that isn't just an R&D issue so much as it is a governor being willing to overrule the idea of home rule and campus rule for how university is run and put that into the centralized arms of the state. If our governor here in Illinois decided he wanted to do that too and push Illinois in a more progressive direction, or UIC in a more progressive direction, that would cause concern there too. Because you have to have shared governance of the conference with presidents. It's not athletic directors, it's not coaches, it's not players, it's presidents. Like, you guys all remember what happened with COVID in this conference, where we had very conservative and very progressive university presidents and governing boards and regents. It nearly tore this league apart. Now imagine you're bringing in a school that has no shared cultural history, no shared geographic history, no shared institutional history with this league, where the governor is trying to use higher education for culture war stuff. And what if there is some kind of LGBTQ issue in college athletics, or trans athletes in sports athletics, or letting some undocumented athlete play here, and the governor's office in Tallahassee is sending something to Florida State. If you're the president at Illinois, if you're the chancellor at Michigan, it's not worth it, man. It's just like, that's why you're not fucking inviting Liberty or BYU for any of this. Like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And so this is the worst time for Florida State to be agitating for this, because if the SEC isn't grabbing you, and if the Big Ten wants to wait, and quite frankly could get most of the benefits of Florida State by just inviting Miami, who's a private school and is a 25% international student campus and has very different governing structures, they're going to do that. All of this reads to me as an athletic director and a president and a couple of regents who are just filling their diapers over the fact that Wake Forest put them in a dumpster on national television, and they're convinced that they need an extra $60 million to fix that. I'm a little mad.
I didn't even think about that.
Most people don't, and I'm sympathetic to this idea of we got to keep politics out of sports. But, like, guys, it's public schools, and how those schools are funded and how they recruit and what they do with that money is explicitly political, and it's always mattered.
Is there any chance for Florida State to leave solo, or are they counting on someone else? Does it need another school? Whether it doesn't look like it's be North Carolina, but whether it's Clemson or someone else, to fight the GR.
There's 6 or 7 other schools that would like to leave if they thought they had a landing spot. Some of them might, some of them probably don't. But the fundamental question here isn't like, your case isn't better if Clemson joins you. The case is, one, do you have a legal argument to challenge the validity of the grant of rights agreement? I have talked to very smart attorneys who bill $500 an hour who said there might be some, but it will be very expensive and you might lose in court. And if you lose in court, that could be financially debilitating to your department. But maybe that exists. Maybe that's the thing they decide to do. Or you pay the check. Does Florida State have $500 million? No, they don't. Florida State was a women's college that, it does not have the engineering and law and professional services schools and that money that Florida does. Like, Florida State's big booster is like the Spanx CEO. Texas didn't have $500 million to buy out of this. So for me, I look at it like, either file the depositions, file the motions, and let's see what the lawyers say or the judges say, or cut the check. But otherwise, you're just message board posting into a microphone. It doesn't matter.
So, Matt, you have a lot of great journalism on Extra Points, and you also have a sweet game called Athletic Director Simulator 3000. Can you talk about that game for a quick second?
Yeah, I would love to. I am a reporter by trade. I'm not a software developer. But in addition to writing things for regular fans and for many administrators who read Extra Points, we also work a lot with college students. with people that are studying sports management or think they might want to work in the industry. So we're always thinking about different ways to explain some of these complicated topics about politics and media rights and all these things to make it accessible to a 20-year-old. And that's why we ended up making this computer game. It's a Java game. It's built to look like the Oregon Trail. Black and green graphics. If you want to hear On Wisconsin in 8-bit audio, so it's coming out of like a Game Boy kind of thing, or the Michigan fight song. All that's in there. And what we did is we have over 100 scenarios that we vetted with actual ADs and coaches and people that work in this industry that an athletic director might reasonably face, whether you're leading a school like Illinois or leading a school like Western Illinois, right? And those things might be different. The player has to balance your school's budget, your school's director's cup ranking, your performance on the field, and your support from your president, from your donors, from your coaches, like the holistic support. And we built the game in a way where there's no right answers. It's meant to be realistic. There's a couple of jokes in there, but it's even the jokes are grounded in reality. But even the right decision could fail, and you could have a terrible, process and end up with a positive result. Just like when schools hire Bobby Petrino, sometimes it works for a couple of years. You can hire Hugh Freeze, and it'll work. It might work for a little while. We know how it's going to end eventually, but it could be a defensible choice in the short term. So no two playthroughs will ever be exactly the same. And I think it will demonstrate that running an athletic department can be very difficult because you're not in control of how things go, even if you make the right choice for your budget or for your hiring decision. It's been out for a couple of weeks, and we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from fans and even from some ADs who have played it and said, "Yeah, this is surprisingly realistic."
Do you have a radical governor mode?
I'll tell you, we are working on building in something similar to that. Like if you're a Big Ten fan, there'll be a couple of things where I'm like, that sounds familiar. Like I'll give an example. Like if you guys followed the news the past couple of years, you might remember the story out of Florida Atlantic. A couple of years ago, they wanted to get a naming rights sponsor for their stadium because the school's kind of broke, right? And their biggest donor was like, "I would love to be the naming rights sponsor for your stadium. Here's $2 million." But that dude made all of his money in private prisons. And they were going to name the stadium after a private prison. And people were like, "Okay, we're going to call it Alcatraz." Right? And they did that with a straight face for 5 days until all of the faculty and a bunch of students said, like, "What are you thinking? This is terrible." And then the school backed down. And I remember talking to a couple of ADs about this. I'm like, what if we change this up? Like, what if the head of Brazzers called you up and wanted to give you $800,000, but his name was going to be on the stadium, and everybody knows that he's in the porn industry. And I had a couple of ADs like, "Don't put me on this. I take the money," right? Like, that's or no. It part of it depends on what school you're at, right? If you're at BYU, you obviously can't do it. If you're in Louisiana, maybe you can. But we joke. I'm exaggerating a little bit. That's a real issue. We know if you follow Illinois State, like they've had to take money from a guy who was a scumbag, because beggars can't always be choosers for who you're raising your money from. And that's a real scenario that real administrators have to deal with.
As someone who's invested, and I'm talking, it's probably close to 1,000 hours into Football Manager, Championship Manager, out of the park baseball, front office football. This game, like, I can't wait to check it out myself. It was made for especially teenage me. I can't wait to check it out. Where can people find this game, and where can people find you, Matt?
They can find all of my work on our website, extrapointsmb.com. You can subscribe to the Extra Points newsletter there for free. You get 2 newsletters a week. You get access to a lot of the other supplemental work that we're doing. We are a reader-supported publication, and with a premium subscription, that's $8 a month, you get access to all of our newsletters. We send 4 each week. Some of them are commentary, some are original reporting. Get you access to Athletic Director Simulator 3000. You can find it on there. It's paywall for our subscribers. And starting next week, you'll also have access to our FOILA directory, which is a huge directory of coaching contracts, shoe deal contracts, athletic director contracts, institutional budget reports. So if you want to know how much Illinois makes from ticket sales for basketball, or what the buyout is for whatever coach, or who's paying what for NIL consulting for whatever reason, you got all that stuff there too. It's just $8. extrapointsmb.com.
Matt, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for your interest in coming onto the Illinicast.
Yep. Yeah, you bet. Take care, fellas. Appreciate you having me on.
Have a good one, Matt. And that was the Illinicast podcast. First part was talking about the top 5 things we're most excited about for training camp. And then we had Matt Brown, who we thank for coming on. Sonny, what a great show.
It was a great show. Don't forget, if you want access to 2 tickets to the first game of the season, show me proof that you subscribe to our YouTube page, DM it to me at Illinicast, and I'll enter you in a drawing. And maybe a week before kickoff, I'll pull a name out, and you might have a chance to go watch them.
All right, Sonny, it was a pleasure, and I hope you have a outstanding weekend.
All right, awesome. Go Cubs.
Go Cubs.